we go. All right. So the city this week is the city of Tzipori. I don't know, has anyone ever been to the city of Tzipori? It's a beautiful city. Oh, wow. Okay. So, oh, goodness, I hear. So I feel like your expertise might outdo my own.
No.
So the city of Tzipori is fascinating because one of the things that I've learned about it is we think of Tzipori as a city of the Mishnah and a city of the post-Bar Kokhba Jewish life in the whatever's left of Jews in Israel. But actually, Tzipori is an extraordinarily mixed city. And it's not a coincidence that one of the names the Romans gave it is the city of peace. Well, not just because the people of Tzipori surrendered, but because it was really very much a city of coexistence, which is what we're going to see. It was a city where Jews and Hellenized Jews and Romans lived side by side in peace. So let's just start off with the details. How Tzipori is a city that's very ancient, but the reason it became such a center for Jewish life is because when the rebellions broke out, they always sided with the Romans. They said, we don't want to have any part of the rebellion. So let's take a look at some of the findings about Tzipori. It's a very old city. All right, 1 second. We'll start here. All right, so Tzipori is in Greek, I guess, and Latin, Sepphoris, and it's also called Ironopolis, which is the meaning. Ironopolis means the city of peace. And it has some very favorable mentionings in the Mishnah and Gemara. Obviously, there's kind of a connection there because it's the city where the Mishnah was sealed and finalized. So Amar Ze'ira, the Talmud says, Kitron azu Tzipori. When it says in the Tanakh, Kitron, that's Tzipori. Ve'lama nikra shma Tzipori. Where did it get that name Tzipori? Sheoshevet b'rosh hahar Tzipori. You get a bird's eye view of the area. So if you take a look, it's actually similar to what we saw in Megiddo. It's this mountain, which isn't a huge mountain, but it's good enough to look around the whole valley that's around it, and that is it. And it's interesting. There's a very famous Gemara also, Yehei Chelki mimachnisei Shabbat b'Tveria umotziei Shabbat b'Tzipori. May I be blessed to, this is very relevant sometimes when you rush Saturday night. May I be blessed to be like the people who accept Shabbat in Tveria and say goodbye to Shabbat in Tzipori. Why? Because in Tveria, the sun sets very quickly because it's close to the Kinneret, so the sun sets to the west and it goes down the mountains very quickly. So Shabbat begins quickly, and Tzipori Shabbat ends late because it's up on a mountain, so you get to see the light for a while. Interestingly, the Mishnah says, what are cities that are surrounded from the days of the days of Yehoshua ben Nun? It is Tzipori. One of them is Tzipori, which interestingly is very, very true because the city of Tzipori goes way back to the Bronze Age, and it's a city that's been there for a while. All right, now, interestingly, also, Tzipori is the capital of mosaics. There is nowhere that I know of in the world with better mosaics than Tzipori. Maybe in Rome. I don't know if anyone has experience with Rome mosaics, but Tzipori is by far, yeah. Joyce, have you seen the mosaics of Rome? Did I say, was that a yes? All right, if yes, you'll tell us. So yeah. This is the city of Tzipori, and it has extraordinary mosaics, some with more than 1 million stones. Very, very extraordinary. All right. Here's another piece from the Talmud with a different name for Tzipori. So Kinneret, obviously recognized, it's the Kinneret body of water. But there's other cities mentioned in the Pasuk in Yehoshua. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Ki havina talia, when I was a little sheep, meaning when I was a child, Amina milta desha'elna l'savia, there was something I asked the elders, and they said what I knew already, Rakat zu Tzipori. The name of Rakat, the city of Rakat mentioned back in Yehoshua is Tzipori, v'lamani krashma Rakat. It's called Rakat because it's like the beginning of a river. All right, now Tzipori, besides for being a fantastic city, is also a great, very fertile ground for agriculture. It's really an ideal city, which may be why it's so wealthy. Interestingly, we're going to see later Tveria. Tveria is a very poor city at this time. It's interesting to see the differences in the wealth. And the most resident, does anyone know who the most famous resident of Tzipori is? Most famous person to ever have lived in Tzipori? So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the head of the Jewish people at the time in the 200s, and the person who really put the Mishnah the way we know it together, in terms of what's a Mishnah, what's included, what's not included, what the Shisha Sidri Mishnah is. That is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and he's mentioned in the Talmud as someone who had a very opulent life. He had extraordinary wealth, and so opulent in a good way, meaning he had plenty of everything. And Tzipori is a very rich city. We're going to see it's a very rich city, and very sharp contrast to Tveria, which is I hate to say this, a pauper's city at the time. All right, here's another story from the Gemara about this is actually from the Jerusalem Talmud about Tzipori. I don't know, some people call it the Palestine Talmud, which makes no sense to me, but the Talmud Yerushalmi is what the Jewish name of it is. Rabbi Yossi B'Shem Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, Shishasar mil chizur l'Tziporin, hen eretz zavat chalav udvash. 16-mile radius of Tzipori. When it says in the Torah, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash, that's what it's talking about, which is in a way a bit of a diss to Jerusalem. If you're I'm sure we have here some faithful Jerusalem fans. So if you're a Jerusalem person, then you might be offended by that. But what he said is that the 16-mile radius of Tzipori, that is the heartland of Eretz Zavat Chalav Udvash. And then there's a very famous story in the Gemara. It's in the Yerushalmi, but it's a famous story. There's a story Rabbi Yossi told his son in Tzipori. He says to his son, Rabbi Yossi says to his son, go bring us dried figs from the attic, from not really the attic, but it's from the roof. So, like in the Middle East, a lot of roofs are straight and people have storage up there. So he goes and he brings grogrot, which is dried figs from the aliyah. He couldn't find the figs because it was all floating with honey. The figs have melted into honey. So the idea is that this is an area that is seen as Zavat Chalav Udvash. It's an area that's very plentiful and very rich, very rich with, in any meaning of that word. All right, so in the modern times, you can see this guy, renowned biblical scholar, Dr. Waterman. In 1939, he digs around and he finds Tzipori. And you're going to see soon, I don't know if anyone here has a Michigan connection. Anyone? I feel like there's always someone with a Michigan connection. Well, if you have an Ann Arbor connection, he was there, and he's from Michigan. And he's an archaeologist that really chanced upon the place and really discovered a lot of it. All right, now in Tzipori we have a very mixed city. There's some very Roman mosaics there, but there's also a synagogue. You're looking now at the synagogue, whatever's left of it, and we're going to see there's also a really beautiful mosaic that was found in the synagogue. Now, the reason I find this interesting, for those who remember Shiloh, it was hard to really put your finger on the connection. As opposed to here, you really have the mosaics, and it in some ways it looks like no time passed. So there's a shul, and if it's okay with you, I'll take you for a quick video tour of the shul. I'll just make sure everyone has their sound going, and here we go. I'll get you Tzipori.
שביל הסנהדרין, אותו ייסדה רשות העתיקות, מתפתל בעקבותיהם של חכמי הסנהדרין, ומבית שערים מגיע לעיר העתיקה ציפורי.
I'm just going to pause for a second. The Talmud says that the Sanhedrin made 10 stops from Jerusalem and on. One is a place called Beit She'arim. We're going to see there's Usha, for those doing Daf Yomi, was mentioned today. And you have Tzipori, and then eventually Tveria. So the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high court, are wandering up the north.
ציפורי, בירת הגליל, הייתה מרכז מדיני ורוחני. לכאן עובר לגור משיקולי בריאות רבי יהודה הנשיא. וכאן הוא חותם את האסופה שהשפיעה על היהדות לדורות עולם.
Just I'm going to pause. Did anyone notice anything unusual about that stone that's, by the way, a street stone over there? Anyone see anything? Look carefully.
There's a menorah in there.
Yes, this is one of the streets of Tzipori. So again, it's a very mixed city. There's a lot of Romans, a lot of Hellenized Jews, but obviously there's also, the bulk of the population is Jewish, and there's a menorah in the street.
על היהדות לדורות עולם 6 סדרי משנה. אל רבי מצטרפים שאר חברי הסנהדרין, ומכאן הם מנהיגים את העם היהודי. יוסף בן מתתיהו מכנה את ציפורי פאר.
So just to stop a second,
ובראשה
it's almost like the difference between a shul where you have an art scroll versus a shul you don't have art scroll, right? You have here in Tzipori. Does anyone see what I'm talking about when I say art scroll in this mosaic that's in the shul in Tzipori? Do you know why I reference art scroll? Well, you can see both Hebrew writing and Greek writing on the same mosaic inside the shul. We're soon going to see what is in this magnificent mosaic, but this round circle is the cycle of the year. Each mazal of the year, you can see Moznaim is for Tishrei. You can see it says Moznaim, and it says Tishrei, it says Cheshvan. Harder to see is probably this is Elul, this is Av. But yeah, this is, you can see the scorpion for Cheshvan. We're going to see closer. You see Keshet for Kislev. And it's really a magnificent mosaic. But I think most telling is the fact that you have both a Hebrew scripture, so a Hebrew writing, and a Greek writing. So it shows you just of how assimilated the area was in a way.
פאר הגליל כולו. העיר משופעת בתי מידות ועשרות פסיפסים מרהיבי עין, ובראשה ניצבת מצודה. עיצוב הפסיפסים הרבים מנציח עד כמה מעורבת הייתה תרבותם של תושבי ציפורי, יהודים, יוונים, רומאים ואחרים.
So we're going to see her again. What does this lady remind you of? Because
Mona Lisa of the Galilee.
Oh, you knew this. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear. Yes, this is the Jewish. You see, we had a Jewish Mona Lisa before they had a Mona Lisa. Even though I don't know that they necessarily. It could have been a Roman. Meaning, I don't know that this is Jewish. It could have been just a Roman living there.
Yeah.
בין הממצאים גם רשת ענפה של אמות
We're going to
ומאגר
see
מים
there's a mention in the
לאורך של
Mishnah of this water spring. So it's 250 meters, which is in feet, probably, what is it? Almost 1,000 feet. But yeah, it's you have this extraordinary water system.
No, there's another.
למעלה מ-250 מטר. ההליכה בהן היא חוויה ייחודית של מסע בזמן. וכך כותב יוסף בן מתתיהו. תושבי ציפורי שבגליל היחידים במחוז הזה שדעתם הייתה נוטה לשלום.
The reason Tzipori survived is because they read the room and they knew that Rome is not something to mess with. And so Tzipori are named by the Romans the city of peace because they make sure to reach out both to the Roman ruler that's in Syria and to Rome, and to let them know that they only want to live with peace, in peace with the Romans. And you can see there's a lot of Roman culture here. There's a theater. And Josephus writes about them. They are the only people in the Galilee who are peace-loving people, meaning they don't have anything against Rome.
I think we have to go back.
הם חשבו מראש על ביטחון עצמם והעריכו כוחה של רומי. על כן לא נחרבה ציפורי במרד הגדול.
So this is, I'm just going to pause a minute. So first of all, Josephus says the reason they survived is because they appreciated Rome's power. Now, this is a traditional, but a fancy Roman street, a cardo, and you can still see, it's almost like yesterday, right? You can see the path, you can see the stones, you can see on the side, by the way, this is all mosaics. So mosaics were very, very popular there, and they obviously had the resources for it. And eventually, when everything else is destroyed, the Sanhedrin also land here.
אחת מן התחנות עליהן נדדה הסנהדרין. העיר ציפורי שבמעלה הגבעה, שביל
that is Tzipori, aka Sepphoris. Now we're going to take a look at the mosaic. All right. So, like I said, you can see there is both Hebrew and Greek here. Interestingly, you take a look here, I said art scroll. The reason it's art scroll is because these are all very Jewish. So I'm going to pause here for a moment and ask you to tell me what major Jewish themes you can see here. Does anyone see anything very Jewish here?
It looks like a Seder plate.
The middle does look like a Seder plate. I don't know if it is, but
Or maybe even on the
look...
right also.
So the right.
No, the right is the right is the Shiva meaning.
Yeah.
Wow, you get an award because the right is the mitzvah of Bikurim. I could not figure it out until I read more about this. But the right is bringing Bikurim. So you have the cart in which you're going to bring the Bikurim, which is fascinating because this is after the destruction of the temple. And what are the birds on the side? Anyone know what the birds on the side of the fruit basket might be?
Would they be for Korbanot?
Yeah, when you, especially if a woman gave birth, she brings those. So when you travel to Jerusalem, you tie your birds to the basket and you come to Jerusalem. Fascinating is on the, and again, this is all mixed Greek and Hebrew. So in a way, this is the first art scroll sitter, right? It's the first mixture. Now on the left, if you look, can anyone recognize even one word on the left? Because you have a lot of Hebrew words there.
This is something.
So it's interesting. On the left,
Hakeves Hasheni.
Very good. So right. So et hakeves ha'achat ta'aseh b'boker ve'et hakeves ha'sheni ta'aseh ben arba'im, and you have shemen and solet and chatzotzrot. So the temple, as much as they were not part of the rebellion, and as much as they did not side either with the Great Rebellion in 66, 67, or with Bar Kokhba in 123, they still obviously were religious Jews who who valued tremendously and had the temple at the center of their consciousness. Now, here's one of the the tkufot. So you have the year is the cycle of 12 months and their mazalot, and also it says tkufat tevet, but you have it in both languages, which I find to be fascinating. It's like really, it's the first time you have both Hebrew and another language in the same thing. You have beforehand the Targum Ashivim, the translation of the Torah to Greek, but to have it side by side is pretty astonishing. It's also interesting to see that the standards of the standards of women dressing are not necessarily the ones that you would see in one of those Orthodox magazines, right? It was more of a liberally spirited place. You can see the women in shul are sleeveless in the picture, and it's just telling of the nature of the city. It was a very mixed city, and everyone lived in peace and coexistence. And it was incredibly also the seat of the Sanhedrin after other places were destroyed. And what's most monumental for us is that it's the place where the Mishnah was finalized, put together, edited. And it's probably also tied to the fact that Rabbi had the resources there, right? He was wealthy. There were obviously very skilled people there. And just to be able to put something like that together, you need to be able to sit in peace and not have wars every minute. So that's the picture here. Here's a closer up image of the korbanot related theme. Yeah, that's a korban related stuff. All right, taking a look here, what do you see here? Because you would think this might be Greek. It's not. It's Jewish. What do you see here? This is old. This is very old.
This is the Arcada.
Yes. Wow. Wow, the Grauman's really.
He's on a roll, Rabbi. He's on a roll.
Yes. Yeah. So that's this is the Arcada. You have Avram, you have Yitzchak, you have the Chamor, and the mountain of Moriah. But it's just pretty amazing to see that it's a city that's wealthy, it's assimilated, and yet it's very Jewish. By the way, do you see any Hebrew words here at the top?
Right.
Any Hebrew words?
Yeah, amen.
Amen, right? So it's interesting. You have maybe it's the bracha or whatever it is, and you have at the end amen in Hebrew. So a lot of the Mishnahs that you have about the people not knowing Hebrew, and that's why we have Chazarat Hashatz and stuff like that, you can really relate to this. Like this was really a area where you had people who were Jewish and you had people who were Jewish. Like there was everything there, right? And there was Roman, outright Roman. And so that was the nature of this city. It's very interesting, a very cosmopolitan place. I think from that perspective, it's a side of the city that we don't get to see, and it's a side of the Judaism at that time that we don't get to hear about often, right? You hear that the Mishnah was signed there, etc., but you don't hear that there was this whole community that was Jewish, very Jewish as they come, and there were people who were like half, like more Greek, and then you had people who were just totally Roman. So the city is really, in a way, just very unique for its time. All right, here's a bigger, I know I really like this Shul mosaic. Here's what it looks like in the synagogue. Although I'm not sure if they let you stand on this. Like at the time, do you think people davened on this? I assume so, right? When people came in for mincha, did they stand on this mosaic? Probably. You can see the menorah at the top right. You see the bikurim. You can see more vessels from the Beit HaMikdash. It's really just a beautiful work of art. And we're going to see more, whether it's the Mona Lisa of the Galilee. The amount of resources you have to put something like this together are very large. You will never see something like this in a place like Tiferia, which was not a wealthy. Well, it's unique. All right. So here's a menorah.
Rabbi, I'm just curious, do the scholars assume that the reason all the mosaics are so well preserved was because the people didn't take up arms against Rome? So the Romans just, didn't
Absolutely.
destroy their buildings and their synagogues?
Well, 2 points. First of all, to begin with this, regardless of conflict and war, you have to be extremely rich, meaning the city has to have so many resources to do this. These kinds of mosaics are the kinds that you might find in the richest neighborhood in Jerusalem, but you don't find them anywhere. And so to begin with, the fact that they have all of this shows you that they were a very, very wealthy city to begin with. And then secondly, the reason it hasn't been ferociously destroyed is because they made peace with Rome. So you have wealth that has gone uninterrupted, whether it's in the years 66 through 70 or during the Bar Kokhba rebellion. The Romans were masters of building, but also masters of destruction. I mean, after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, there's nothing left in Judea. They go town after town, village after village. They just absolutely decimate the land. And so the fact that the people of Tzipori didn't choose that path it just shows you that how much was preserved and how had they not chosen that path, it would have been much worse. But you wonder. I'll tell you, to be honest, it hurts because you think about other cities which could have done the same and would have been saved, right? You think of cities that didn't take this path, and Josephus writes, this is the only city that did this, the only city. I mean, you have to wonder to yourself, like, what would happen if the people of Gamla sent a letter to Rome? What would happen if Jerusalem sent it? It's really heartbreaking to think of, I guess, what do you call it? The Monday morning quarterback, where you're like, what if people would have done this or that? But they were smart about it, and they sent through them. All right, this is the what they call the Mona Lisa of the Galilee, and some of these mosaics, like I said, have more than 1 million stones, and that takes both a huge amount of wealth, and it's not like you paint on these stones, you bring stones in different colors. So like, just to bring the materials and to have the artist, well, it's not really, it's artists, but it's also slave labor a lot. So yeah, it takes a lot. Here is again the theater. You can see it was a integrated city, Jews, non-Jews, Hellenized, non-Hellenized. And here is a passage from the Talmud. Darash Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Ma'u shenemar, what is it that it is written? Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzat rishaim u'bemoshav letzim lo yashav. Ashrei mi shelo halach, sorry, those words should be separated differently. Ashrei mi shelo halach leteatraot v'lekirkasaot shel ovdei kochavim. Praiseworthy is the person who never went to the theater and circus of the idol worshippers. You can imagine that if he said this, there were plenty of Jews who were going to the theater. Another passage here, Umot ha'olam atanoten lehem edam, the nations of the world, when they have a cause for celebration, hem ochlim v'shotim v'pochazim, they eat, they drink, and do ridiculous, silly things. V'nichnasim b'teatrot u'b'vatei kirkisot u'machna'isim otcha, and they go to the theater and the circus. So obviously the rabbis, at least many of them, were not fans of the concept of going to the theater. You can imagine this is also part of the culture war, right, between the Jews and the Romans. And if you are against the Roman culture, you say don't go to the theater. All right, here's another, the Amat HaMayim. Remember we saw that long water cistern? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maaseh be'Amat HaMayim she'ayta ba me'aveh letzipori. By the way, why are there so many Talmudic and Mishnaic sources about Tzipori? Why is it that I'm digging up all these great sources? Anyone know? Why so much for Tzipori? Because that's where the Mishnah is written. So eventually all the scholars end up there. It's a city where you just end up with a lot of the rabbis.
Do you think the Jews who went to the theater were the first modern Orthodox Jews?
You know what? I don't, because you have that already in 100 BCE. I think the Jews that had the shul with the Greek and the Hebrew on the same mosaic, for sure. Yes, 100%. That is the first time I've ever seen such a thing of side by side. Again, you have sources that are only Greek. You have sources that are only Hebrew, but to have the same mosaic that's both in Hebrew and in Greek, I think, yes, the Tzipori is your first modern Orthodox community. Here, this is remember the Talmud mentions how the water cistern worked, so they had a very fancy water cistern. So here's a bit of how the theater worked. If it's okay.
ציפורי. מדוע נקרא שמה ציפורי? שיושבת בראש ההר כציפור. למעשה מדובר כאן בגבעה טבעית, שעליה החלו את בניית העיר, החל מהתקופה ההלניסטית.
Just take a look at...
למעשה יהודים רבים. המרד הגדול פורץ בשנת 66.
I lost that place.
ראשונה.
Take a look at this. You see how you have the theater, you have the shul. It's like Robert said, it's a modern Orthodox community.
לפני הספירה. עיר של יהודים מצד אחד, ומצד שני היא משלבת בתוכה תרבות, טכנולוגיה וגישה מערבית. כאמור, היא נוסדה בתקופה ההלניסטית, והולכת ופורחת וצומחת, אבל השיא שלה מגיע לאחר המרד הגדול. המרד הגדול פורץ בשנת 66, וממתינים לרומאים. הרומאים מגיעים, ומה עושה ציפורי? נכנעת. היא לא מוכנה, העיר ותושביה, להשתתף במרד.
So you can see the people of Tzipori, they're the ones who send the letter to the Romans, and they refuse to be part of the rebellion.
התמיכה הגדולה של ציפורי מגיעה לאחר חורבן ירושלים ונפילת מצדה בשנת 73. למעשה יהודים רבים מארץ יהודה עוברים אליו.
Just look at this street and recognize how many workers you need to create such a beautiful cardo.
גליל, ומאכלסים מחדש את אותו גליל, הופכים אותו לירושלים החדשה, או ליהודה החדשה. וציפורי צומחת במקום ירושלים, והופכת להיות בירת הגליל.
So this is, Tzipori becomes, it really replaces Jerusalem in the sense that all the refugees from Judea come here.
אנחנו נמצאים בתוך מאגר המים הקדום של ציפורי, שמתוארך למאה הראשונה והשנייה לספירה. למעשה מדובר באלמנט חצוב בתוך הסלע הטבעי שהיה כאן. לתוכו הושתתו.
I'm going to pause here. I'm not going to finish the whole video, but you can see the mikvahs, the water systems. This is a city that had an influx of people and obviously had many people coming to it. So that's that part of Tzipori. I am going to show you another quick video if it's okay. I hope people don't mind, but just a quick clip of this part. 1 second. Or actually, sorry, I think we saw that part. 1 second. All right, so that is that. All right, now, here's something that I will tell you shocked me to the core of my being. I hope everyone's sitting, okay? Everyone's sitting, everyone's ready for this because it's kind of shocking. So here's a story in the Gemara, which when I first saw it, I couldn't believe it, but it's a story in the Gemara, and just get ready for the shock of your life, yeah? So remember, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is the leader of the Jewish people. He's fulfilling 3 roles. He's the political leader of the Jewish people. He's the head of the Sanhedrin, and he's also the codifier of the law. He's the one putting together the Mishnah. And here we go. Just get ready for this. I don't know, maybe it's not going to shock you as much as it shocked me. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi sat v'rachatz b'krona shel Tzipori b'shivasar b'Tammuz. Rabbi went to the bathhouse of Tzipori on the 17th of Tammuz. Do you hear that? He went and bathed here on the 17th of Tammuz. Now here's the part that shocked me, really. Ubikesh la'akor tish'a be'av. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who is the head of the Jewish people, wanted to undo and cancel Tisha B'Av. Yeah, believe it or not, he wanted to undo Tisha B'Av. V'lo hodulo. Now, why did he want to undo Tisha B'Av? Anyone know? Any ideas on why Rabbi might have wanted to completely abolish Tisha B'Av? So, one of the reasons is, this is just my thought. I'm not, this is not speaking on behalf of any other rabbi or whatever, but the reason is he's seen 2 destructions, right? He's seen what happened, not with his own eyes, but he sees the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash in the year 70. He sees the Bar Kokhba rebellion, and he says, this messianic yearning is not helping us. If you're a Tziporite, you are thinking, guys, let's just get with the program. Why are you constantly trying to rebuild the temple and get into wars with Rome? And so he wanted to abolish Tisha B'Av. But, it wasn't something that was a popular opinion. Amar lefanav Rabbi Abba bar Zivda, Rabbi lo kachayam. I said, no, that's not what happened. So he's going to minimize that. Tisha B'Av shecha liot b'Shabbat. It was a Tisha B'Av that was on Shabbat. And dachinu la'achar Shabbat, just like this year, it was a nidcha. Rabbi said, you know what, if you have a Tisha B'Av that's not on Tisha B'Av, meaning it comes out on Shabbat, and therefore it gets pushed to Sunday, we might as well not observe it on Sunday, the way we did this year. So if it would be this year, Rabbi would abolish Tisha B'Av. And he said, still they didn't take what he said, but it's still amazing. Now, if you want to wonder, this is, I think, the amazing part. What the pool that Rebbe went to swim in on the 17th of Tammuz looked like? Well, you get a perfect look at it. This is Krona shel Tzipori. This is the pool of Tzipori. To be honest, I think it's better than any pool you have in Manhattan, right? It's a pretty impressive pool. No, am I the only one amazed at this pool? Here's another picture of it. It's an extraordinary pool. So this is where Rebbe goes and swims on the 17th of Tammuz. Just to make a point that he did not really hold of the whole thing. But Robert, what do you think of the pool?
Nice.
Well, it's impressive, but what I'm wondering is, when it talks about Rebbe wanting to abolish Tisha B'Av,
Yeah.
and although it doesn't seem to expound on it, was the fact that since Tisha B'Av came out on Sunday that year, do they, presumably Rebbe wouldn't have swam on Shabbat, so he would have been swimming on the 18th of Tammuz rather than the 17th. And is that why he says, it's no big deal that I went swimming on Shabbat B'Tammuz?
You know what? That is, I really say this as someone who studies Talmud a lot. That is an extraordinary question. That is a brilliant question. And I feel like this should even go to Rabbi Levine, but it's a very, very good question. Wow, that is very impressive. Yeah, so you're asking if it really, according to those who say that it was talking about only on Shabbat, what does that reflect on the part we mentioned about the 17th of Tammuz? Does that mean that was a matter of consensus or not? But either way, you can know for certain that Rebbe did not believe in 17th of Tammuz altogether, and even Tisha B'Av is something he tried to. Now, there's one thing to not hold. I'm sure someone here was on a fast of Tammuz or another fast. I'm sure you were in a situation where you had to eat. It happens to everyone. Sometimes on a fast, you have something you need to eat. You don't go and eat on the street, right? You eat at home. But Rebbe goes to the most public place he can possibly go to, and he shows he's not just here to chill. He's here to make a point. He is at Krona shel Tzipori. This is like going to the town square. It is the town square. And he's making a very clear and public point. And I think it just sort of reinforces what we hear about it. Just when you see this, you see the vastness of this pool. It's not just a bathhouse like you would have in Jerusalem, a small bath. This is the Olympic swimming pool. So here's you can see it has different, I'm sure they had a warmer water, colder water, whatever it is. So this is Krona shel Tzipori. This is the Cardo, and you can see it's a posh city. All along the Cardo, you have mosaics, millions upon millions of stones, beautiful stones. And now we're going to go to a less grounded discovery. I always like to tell you what the rating or the qualification of what I'm saying is. And this is Beit She'arim, which is believed to be the grave of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. This is not nearly on the level of certainty that we have on archaeological findings in Jerusalem, or even Tzipori, but this is believed to be the kever of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. You can see obviously the name Beit She'arim. You see these three beautiful gates. But how did they figure it out that this is Rebbe's place of burial? It says, this is a midrash, there was a miracle the day Rabbi died. Erev Shabbat, it was the Erev Shabbat, and everyone got together for the hesped of Rabbi. And they took him quickly to Beit She'arim. Now, how do they figure this out? One of the things that Rebbe did is he wrote a will. And he said, here are four things that he said. There's two versions, by the way. Here are things that he left in his will. One, I'll give you both versions. One is he said, Hizaru b'chvodimchem. Be nice to my wife, your mom. Second, Ner sheli yehi daluk b'mkomo, my candle will be lit in its place. 3, mitate mutzat b'mkoma, leave my bed made as it is. And then he says, the people who were, I guess, my assistants while I was alive will also be considered my assistants while I die. Another one is another version from the Midrash, which is similar. Al tazuzal menuti mitoch beiti, do not remove my widow from my house. The al taspiduni bayarot sheberetz Yisrael, do not lament me. The al tanichu lenochri sheigah b'mitati, do not let a non-Jew touch my bed. Whoever took care of me while I was alive will take care of me when I'm dead. Pretty similar to the previous point, but not the same. All right, here it is. Here's the Rebbe's grave. You'll find I found this fascinating. I hope you will give a minute of it.
מהסוג שאנחנו רואים כאן,
So inside here, wealthy people would have first they would leave the body out, and then a year after the death you would have likut atzamot, and the bones of wealthy people would be buried in these sockets in the wall.
כל אחד מהם נמצאת אבן שבה יש ציון של האדם שהיה טמון בכוך
So the
הזה.
names that they found, I don't know how old, but the names that they find are the names of the three people that Rebbe said should be his successors. So those are the three names that they find inside his gravesite.
זה הוא המקום שלתוכו הכניסו את עצמות הנפטר.
So you can see
שסדרי הקבורה
Shimon over
בית שני
there.
ובתקופת המשנה והתלמוד היו שהניחו את המת, את הנפטר בתוך המערה, לאחר שנה חזרו ונשארו רק העצמות, עשו ליקוט עצמות, הכניסו את העצמות לתוך ארון קטן שנקרא גלוסקמה, או לפעמים אפילו לתוך כד קטן, ושמו את הגלוסקמה או את
to have such a family burial site, you had to be from the very wealthy people.
הכד בכוך שבקירות המערה. ולכן אנחנו רואים כאן לאורך המערה כמה וכמה כוכים, אבל בשלושה כוכים שנמצאים בעולם הזה, מצאנו אבן שמציינת את שמו של הנפטר.
I'm just going to take you, speed you up to the part where he speaks about the will and the and his actual burial place.
לשלושת התפקידים האלה, את שני בניו, הוא אומר.
This is the hesped, the will that he gives.
רבי שמעון, בני שמעון, חכם. בני שמעון,
So there are three roles that Rabbi had, and he divides it up among his sons, sort of like with Alexander the Great. One's going to be the head of the yeshiva, one's going to decide, and one's going to be the person who leads the communal issues. I'm just going to show you what the actual place, I'm trying to find the actual place where he's at. One second. Oh, here we go. So he says, I want to be buried in the ground, which is how poor people are buried. And indeed, if you go in, you see that he's buried with his wife, and he asked to be buried like everyone. So the poor people get buried in the ground. And so Rabbi says, I want to be buried in the ground. So not only that, they bring in ground from outside to have him buried. So that's just a brief outlook at Rebbe's burial place. If anyone has questions before we continue to our next site, which is Tveria, quickly. Questions on Rebbe's burial place, you're welcome. Otherwise, we'll continue. But that is Rebbe's site of burial. All right, Tveria. One second. Half a second. All right, so we're going to go to Tveria, which is just a quick background on Tveria. Anyone here ever been to Tveria? Yes? Okay, so Tveria is two things. Tveria is a modern city in the sense that it is built by Herod's son in the year around 20 of the Common Era, and it's also a very poor city. And nobody wants to live there because it's built on a cemetery. What's the why not live on a city that's built on a cemetery? Anyone? Well, obviously it's not ideal real estate, but why, especially in those days, is that detrimental to real estate? Why do we have any Kohanim in the audience?
I was just exactly saying it.
Yeah, so if you're a Kohen, you're forbidden from living from passing near a dead body. B, the Kohanim those days are the wealthy people, so there's no wealthy people in the city. C, even if you're not a Kohen, if you become impure, there are all kinds of rituals you have to go through. So Tiberia, actually, for those, anyone here ever sing the song Adonenu Bar Yochai? Ve'amartem kol echai, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, ve'amartem kol echai. It's a Lag BaOmer song. One of the things we say about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is Tiher et ha'ir Tveria. He made the city Tveria pure, and Tveria is a very non-Jewish name. It is named for a fellow named Tiberius. Yeah, so it's really it's a city that starts off without purity, not pure. It has actually, before he calls it Tveria, afterwards it was changed to Claudiopolis, Tveria, and eventually, once Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai purifies it, there's a family of Kohanim from the order of Ma'aziyah who end up moving here. So you see, they do have some kind of mosaic here, not as fancy as Tzipori. And Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar Rakat Shema. Lama nikrat Shema Tveria. Its original name is Rakat. Why is it called Tveria? Well, you say, you're looking at me. I know Joyce is thinking, what do you mean? Why is it called Tveria? It's called Tveria because it is a name for Tiberius. So there's this kind of rationalization. Called Tveria, Sheyoshevet b'tabura shel Eretz Yisrael. A tabur is a belly button, and it's sort of coming to say that Tveria is at the center of Israel, which it isn't necessarily, but if you live there, then I guess that's what it looks like. Again, you have this circle. It's much, much less fancy than the one we saw in Tzipori, and you have the 12 mazalot. You have also a Roman waterway, but it's a much poorer city. It was populated by many slaves, and it's just a much, much poorer city. Here, after Tzipori doesn't work, Amar Rabbi Elchanan, this is from Talmud Rosh Hashanah, Eser Masalot Nasa Shechina, Ukenegdan Galta Sanhedrin. The Shechina traveled 10 times, and the Sanhedrin traveled accordingly also 10 times. Mirushalayim liyavne, and then eventually you get to Tzipori, and from Tzipori to Tveria. Utveria amukam mikulan. Tveria is the lowest point. Umisham atidin leigal. So if you ever lived in Tveria, you might love this because it says that eventually Tveria is where will be the Mashiach, the ultimate redemption, is going to come from. So that's the city of Tzipori, the city of Tveria. I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, here I'll turn that off a second.